All right, how to prep and ace an interview. So hence, they are the exact same thing. So when you're preparing for an interview, like one of the panelists was saying earlier, she interviews herself, which is perfect. Like talking to yourself, as crazy as it may sound, is like one of the best preparation methods for an interview. And so when we were doing these interviews or whatever, we would start with the end in mind and literally just walk through how we wanted the interview to go. And I think that I'm a big believer in visualization. And again, interviews are one of the most important things that you'll do in your life. Like you have 30 minutes to change your life through the interview that you're having with someone. And that conversation could completely alter your direction. So preparing for that is a pretty big thing. So on Google, there's a couple different things that are pretty interesting. One is you have general search results, which will just return a website or whatever. But also you have a little feature, a little tab called News. And with News, you can see everything that's been reported on that company in the most recent manner. So like any articles that have appeared or whatever. My favorite though is kind of just checking out their social media accounts, because that's like the most recent stuff that has been shared from that company. So and a lot of the times it's kind of weird, but I feel like the companies that do really strong in social media and update it frequently are the companies that I like to work for. It's the companies that aren't doing anything on Facebook and haven't like posted in like 6 months or whatever, that I'm like, I don't know if I'd be a great fit there, but that might just be me personally. So I encourage you guys to check out that social media stuff, because it always gives you some kind of conversation starter, whether it's news or one of the companies I was looking at had like this thing that they would post called Salad Tuesdays. So every Tuesday, one of their employees would have to make a salad for 20 of the whole office, like 20 employees. They'd take a picture of the salad and the whole staff. And that's something you don't get from a website or Google or whatever. And so not only you as a candidate see that you have to make a salad, like if you go work there, but that's like one of the cool things to talk about and show in that interview that you did your research and you know exactly what's going on in that company. Like that's a pretty good one to throw out there in the interview. So you have any questions for me? Yeah, tell me about Salad Tuesday. And what did you make? So how does an interview go? The people that just did an interview, like what happens? Like give me the whole format. Like what happens from the start to the finish? What happens at the start? What's that? Introductions. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Brad. You are? Gibson. All right. Nice to meet you. What else happens? Introduction. Okay, so yeah, they give you a little rundown. So, we're hiring for this position because blah, 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 blah. All right, what else? Tell me about yourself. That's a great one to open up with. All right, what else? How do you hear about us? What else? Yep, example scenarios, what you would do if you had a crazy coworker who was out to get you. Yeah, everything, right? So an interview goes like this. Question, 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 questions for me, action item. All right? This is the most powerful slide that I have in this whole presentation, because you have generally about 3 questions, maybe 4, maybe 5, give or take, in an interview that really gives you the opportunity to showcase your skills and what you're all about. And then you have questions for me, and then your action item. So your whole goal in this interview is to get to the next step, right? It's selling that person, that one person, not like the whole company, but that one person that you are worthy enough to be introduced to someone else. So this goes for both informational interviews and job interviews. Your whole goal with an informational interview is to obviously get introduced to someone else within that industry, or the hiring manager, or the most interesting person that they know. With a job, it's like, all right, that first recruiter that you meet is determining whether or not they want to introduce you to the person that is ultimately their boss, which is like a senior manager of whatever. So your action item, start with it in mind. Your action item should be I guess your action item should be to be introduced to someone else. All right? And don't give them any reasons to not introduce you to someone else. Like, that's the whole goal. So backing it up from that, you have your any questions for me. And usually the way I like to do it in interviews is making it as much about that one person as possible, because questions for me means, hey, I've got 3 to 5 minutes left in this interview. You know, I'm required almost as an interviewer to leave some time to ask that question. Do you have any questions for me? And so your goal with that is to turn that 3 minutes or that 5 minutes into like 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And the way that you do that is to get them talking. And there's no way that they want to leave that room with you having more questions. They're not going to just cut you off and be like, oh, I got to go to this next interview. If that's the case, you probably didn't do great in the first part anyway. So the questions for me part should be as much about that person and get those people talking, so that when they look at like their day, they've interviewed 8 people or something like that. They're like, all right, Johnny interviewed him, that was good. Susie, all right, that was good. Oh, but that one kid, dude, man, I went like 20 minutes over because I guess I was talking about whatever, and they just don't even remember like what the heck they just talked about, but they remember that your interview lasted longer than anyone else, and that's given them a reason to advance you on to the next stage, because something must have went right in that interview for me to spend 20 extra minutes with that person. So your whole goal is to not get denied in that very first round. And the way that you do that, I think, is making that interview almost as much about that person as it is about yourself. And then backing up to the very first portion, question. So tell me about yourself. You obviously want to make that pretty short, concise, sweet, and interesting. Does that interview format make sense? It's usually just question. I'm interviewing you, questions for me, and then that action item. So this is how we conducted all of our interviews. And you can use these questions if you like when people, when you do your own informational interviews. So the very first question is, where were you at 22 years old, and how did you get to where you are today? And that question, that answer to that question takes forever. And it gives you some awesome stuff that you would never, ever think that people would talk to you about. Like one of the people, we interviewed the CEO of MGM Grand, and when we asked him this question, he's like, well, back it up. Actually, I want to tell you about when I was 16 years old. I had $120 in my wallet. I lived in Egypt, and I spoke 4 different languages, and my goal was to speak more of those languages more fluently. So I went to France. I flew out to France. I spent about a one-way ticket from Cairo to Paris with $120, so I had no money. I landed in the airport, asked people for a job until I got one, and then I went to work. And that's like how he got his start in tourism and started working at a restaurant or whatever. And like, there's no way you could Google that and get that kind of information. Like, people have so many different stories that are just willing to come out that are just outlandish. Like, you can't look at someone and be like, wow, where were you, spring break, 2010 or whatever. Like, there's like some crazy stories that people have. And this question is gold, because it just brings everything out, gives you material for the whole interview. So yeah, that was just a story I just told about Kamal Aziz and MGM. I told you that whole story about Alex Guanciale, that chef that stayed in that Parisian restaurant after her 3-day internship. And that's just like some personal stuff. And that's another really good reason why you asked that question. Because you want to build a personal connection with that person that you're in that interview with. And just asking about themselves, just out of the nature of that question. Like someone asked earlier, like what the biggest sacrifice was about their whole pursuit of where they were today. And that's like a pretty good question, because it develops that personal relationship. It makes them open up beyond just like their standard responses about like, tell me about the benefits of this company. Why do you like working for this company? Like all that stuff that they probably answer like 8 times out of 8 basically in every interview. Like you have to give them some kind of personal connection and some kind of question to get that personal connection going. And then where were you at 22? Yeah, so trust, gets them talking, gives you a lot of material. So on that interview format slide, I had those 3 question marks right there. The first question is that where were you at 22? The next one is what are you curious about? So you have, like, to take the pressure off about this informational interview, this is just information that you're getting. It's not like a job opportunity, and I almost approach this same like lightheartedness to job interviews as well. Because this is like an opportunity to learn, like, and it's kind of cool. Like when people are really excited and you show your curiosity, you kind of differentiate yourself as a candidate. So what are you curious about? And I've kind of developed like a little structure around curiosity and in interviews. The very first thing is how do you decide on X? So with the people that we interviewed, like this organist for the Chicago Cubs, we're like, how do you decide on what song to play? Or when we're interviewing a venture capitalist, it's like, how do you decide on what companies to invest in? How do you decide on what to feed the killer whale that day? How do you decide on what shoes to design for Jordan? Like there's so many different things about how do you decide on, and that's a really good thing. Whenever you're thinking about any kind of questions to ask people, think about the job that they're in, and think about the decisions that they have to make. Because those are the ones that will get them thinking, and be like, at the end of the day, they're like, oh yeah, Brett did ask me something that like actually made me think. It makes you stand out when you make them think about the decisions that they actually make. What's it like to ride a killer whale? What's it like to be a CEO of a major corporation? What's it like to have Pamela Anderson pose for you? Different stuff like that. And this is like the time where you get all of your curiosity, all of your questions answered. Like this is I was talking about windows of opportunity earlier in this morning's talk. This is a window of opportunity to get all the questions that you ever wanted to know about that certain job answered. Which is why I think that informational interviews are pretty powerful stuff. So that's, and again, we had that one question earlier about I've got so many different ideas, so many different directions that I want to go. How do I decide on what's best for me? This is the experience where you really decide on what's best. What ideas do I have that are just ideas, and which ones really have like potential? And the way that you determine that is going out and talking to those people that actually are doing it on a daily basis, asking them really candid questions, and getting answers to those questions to kind of appease your curiosity. Does it ever get old? So you get asked like the real hardcore questions, like, hey, I'm really seriously considering becoming blank, and does it ever get old taking pictures of women for 25 years? The answer is yes. All right. So how do you like continue that momentum and make it interesting for yourself on a daily basis? And those insights that you take away from that are like pretty powerful that you can apply to any job, whether it's the job that you're applying for or anything else. And then closing question. This is also gold. It took us a while to get, but when you think about an interview, it's about them, right? The questions that you ask are about you. So instead of asking, do you have any advice for me? Like as I go off and do, what you've done, you ask them, all right, so if you were to do this over again and at 22 years old, offer yourself one piece of advice, what would you say to your 22-year-old self? And obviously you're asking like, give me some advice, but you're also personalizing it, and it really makes them think. Like people just get pretty impressed by this question. All right, questions for me? This is the time to shine right here. So this is like, again, developing that personal connection with someone to extend that interview time. So questions for me. So if you are doing the interviewing, the informational interviewing, there's a couple questions that people will ask you. So as a student, it's like, so what's next for you? You got to have a good answer for that question. It's like, hey, what's next for me is that I'm trying to get a job, and I'm trying to get it in this field, and I'm doing everything I can right now to try to make that happen. Next, another question, and this question only gets asked pretty much if you didn't do a great job interviewing them, or telling them why you wanted to interview them in the request. But yeah, so why did you want to interview me? People are always curious about that when they usually ask it. Why did you decide to major in X? This is really good when they ask this question and you're doing the interviewing, because that means that they're interested in it. And they're like, hey, how can I really help that? And then why do you want to be a nutritionist, social media person, whatever? This is, again, a really good question to be asked, because it gives you an opportunity to display your passion for work, whatever that profession is that you're talking about. So that's from the informational interviewing side. If you're being interviewed, some of my favorite questions to ask, like if you're doing an on-campus interview, it depends on, first of all, who you're actually talking to. If it's a recruiter, then your questions are going to be a little more general. Again, your whole goal is to just pass the next step. So again, that personal connection is a good way to do that. But if you are interviewing with like a senior manager, or someone that's actually going to give you a job, then what keeps you up at night when you're thinking about making this business successful? So again, going back to the job description, it's actually a company problem that they're trying to solve. And so you're trying to, again, get to their pain points, get to it's sales, right? I mean, you're getting to their point of pain, and then you're trying to solve their problem. And that's all a job interview is, that's all a sales opportunity is just solving problems. How do you describe how decision making gets done in this company? This is a pretty important one, especially for like senior management, because it's like companies are just so different. Like, it's all in the same industry, but the way that things get done can vary so greatly. And it's always interesting to get a senior manager's perspective on how decision making actually gets done. And one of my favorite parts about this morning's panel was that dude that was like, I talked to the secretary, she said this place sucks. You got to talk to everyone that you can, especially because they'll be like, especially receptionists, because they'll go up to the senior manager, will go up to the receptionist after the interview, be like, so, how was Johnny in the lobby? Did he talk to you? Did he sit there reading magazines? Did he play on his phone? What did he do? And that's almost like more important than the interview itself. Like sometimes it's like what you've done from the minute that you walk in the door. So that's one. And then and this is one of my favorite ones too. For those who have been in this role previously, what differentiated the ones who have been good and great? This is an opportunity for them to talk about some of the problems that they've experienced with that role, what they hope to kind of correct moving forward in the next candidate, and it gives them an opportunity to really talk about what they're looking for. So, and it gives you an opportunity in response to really be like, yeah, well, you know what, I'm actually pretty good at this that previous person was great in, so you should hire me. And all these questions really are leading up to that action item, which is tell me what you're looking to do. Like, the whole reason why we're doing this interview today is because you want to do something. You want to be hired. You want to meet someone at a certain company. Whatever your reason is for that interview, this is like all these questions for me are like, all right, let's cut to the chase. Tell me what you're looking to do and how can I help? So that's the next step, is action items and being prepared and specific. So the whole reason why you have that, we're done? All right. So the whole reason why you have that interview is just so you can have that action item. And some of the action items are, do you know someone else I can interview? It's not that you're hiring for X, would you mind introducing me to the hiring manager? Can I get a tattoo? Like, obviously, if the interview is going south, like, you just, whatever. There's cool perks. And then, all right, so this is my closing, is envision the end before it happens. So in the interview, that's pretty important. That preparation is the actual interview that will transpire. Use the interview to reach the end. And then, use the interview to really change your life for the whole better. And I think that's the most powerful thing is when you're looking at interviews, like it's an opportunity to really change your life. And I think that you should put everything that you have into it and rock it out. So that's it. Oh, and don't forget to send a thank you note. I'd also like that. It's a good touch. So that's it. And you can download the presentation right there. It's SlideShare / interviewing. There's a dot between slideshot and read. So that's it.